There's a moment that destroys her ego more than any breakup line, more than any "we need to talk," and more than any text you will ever send. It's when you go completely silent. You stop chasing. You stop checking in. You stop giving her what she didn't even know she needed: your attention. She tells herself she doesn't care. But her mind doesn't believe her. Because when you go quiet, her ego doesn't hear rejection. It hears abandonment. And every part of her identity starts falling apart. If you've ever chased a woman, begged for her time, or tried to prove your worth to someone who treated you like a backup plan, this video is for you. If you've ever been ghosted and wondered why your silence didn't destroy her like hers destroyed you, this video is your blueprint to never feel like that again. And if you've ever felt invisible, this is how you become unforgettable. Before we start, drop this phrase in the comments if you're serious about evolving. I choose power over approval. You were taught to speak, to check in, to chase. You were taught that silence is rude, cold, unkind. But silence is clarity. It's what separates emotional weakness from inner strength. Every time you reach out first, you give away more than words. You give away certainty. And every time you pull back, you force her to face something far scarier than being rejected, not being chosen. This isn't about punishing her. This is about freeing you. If you stay with me until the end, I promise, you'll never again waste your time wondering, what if I just tried a little harder? You'll never need her to come back, because you'll realize she needed you the whole time. Number 1, silence strips her ego of control. When you go silent, you're not just pulling away from a conversation. You're initiating the most psychologically powerful shift a woman with a fragile ego will ever experience, and it all starts the moment your consistency ends. She doesn't feel the absence of you. She feels the absence of the validation machine she depended on without even realizing it. Most women don't consciously wake up thinking they want to control a man. But control is exactly what her ego builds when you make yourself emotionally accessible around the clock. Think back. How often were you the one who sent the good morning text? Who checked in when she looked upset on stories? Who gave her compliments without prompting, kept the conversation going when she gave dry replies, stayed invested even when she seemed bored? Every time you did that, you built a structure, a predictable emotional framework that she could rely on to feel significant, even if she never gave back the same energy. It made her feel like she was still attractive, still interesting, still wanted, not because she was putting effort into you, but because your effort validated her image of herself. But when you go silent, and I mean truly silent, not fake silence while you're still watching her stories or hoping for a text, that entire ego structure shatters, because now the mirror she used to reflect her desirability is gone, and that silence isn't just confusing, it's humiliating. She starts to wonder, why did he stop? What changed? Did I lose my grip? Is there another woman? And these questions, while they may sound like curiosity, are actually ego screams. This is the beginning of her inner world spinning out. And this is where your power begins to rise. Because if you've ever been through heartbreak, if you've ever watched a woman slowly lose interest while you gave more and more, if you've ever spent nights obsessing over texts that went unanswered, now you're seeing the other side. The side where silence isn't weakness, it's dominance. And it's in that space that you start to understand something most men never will. You were never powerless. You just kept handing your power away. Let me ask you this. Has a woman ever gone cold on you without warning after weeks or months of emotional connection? Maybe things seemed perfect. Daily messages, emotional sharing, moments of intimacy. Then one day she's short. The energy shifts. You ask if she's okay, and she says, just busy or just tired. And in the days that follow, your gut tells you the truth. Her interest is gone, but you don't know why. So you try harder. You send thoughtful messages. You offer to see her. You ask if everything's okay again, but she just drifts further until you're left alone, questioning your worth. That moment, that spiral of uncertainty and self-blame, that's the exact experience your silence now creates for her. The roles have reversed, but unlike her, you're not doing it to wound. You're doing it to observe, to listen, to reset the dynamic. And this is where ego loses its grip, because the female ego thrives in one direction. It needs your pursuit. Without it, it collapses. Now let's be clear. We're not talking about all women. We're talking about women who are used to being chased, women who don't know how to invest first, women who are emotionally immature or addicted to attention, or used to men proving their worth instead of requiring hers. And these women, they don't process silence like mature adults. They experience it as rejection of identity, and identity rejection is trauma to the ego, which means everything she does next, the ignoring, the posting, the pretending she doesn't notice, it's all defense. Now, I want you to picture this. A woman is used to 5 men texting her, liking her photos, checking in. She may not even be interested in most of them, but the collective energy feeds her. It reinforces her belief that she's valuable, special, desirable. But then one man, you, go quiet. And not out of rage, not out of pettiness, but because you've chosen to redirect your energy. You stop replying instantly. You stop watching her stories. You stop commenting, reacting, checking in. At first, she shrugs. She's still got the others, right? But then a few days pass. Her story gets half the views it used to. Her post doesn't get a like from you. The little dopamine drip she got from your presence. Gone. And suddenly, she's in an emotional fog. Why did he disappear? Did I do something? Is he with someone better? And those questions trigger a response the female ego is rarely prepared for: internal silence. It's not about you anymore, it's about her, and what your silence says about her value. She might respond by doubling down on social media or pretending she's unbothered, but if you hold the line, if you stay silent without bitterness, you'll witness something rare, the unraveling of a false ego structure, and it's in that unraveling that truth begins to emerge. So what do you do during this phase? You don't wait for her, you don't monitor her reaction, you don't stalk her page or secretly hope she'll reach out. You focus on the life you've been neglecting while chasing someone who didn't earn you. Start by getting back into your body. Gym, discipline. Go for a run. Lift weights not for aesthetics, but for control. Watch how your posture changes when your back's tight, your grip is strong, your legs are sore from pushing limits. Start writing again, not poems or desperate journal, but plans, goals, daily tasks. Read your own thoughts like a map. Ask yourself, what kind of man would never chase validation again? What does he eat? Who does he surround himself with? What are his principles? Then write that version of you into existence. Each hour you spend working on your own path, you strip her ego of another inch of control. Because she feels that shift. She feels your absence. And more importantly, she feels your elevation. Now ask yourself something else. Have you ever had a woman message you out of the blue after you stopped chasing her? Maybe she said, "I was just thinking about you," or "It's been a while." But think about it. Did she do that when you were texting her constantly? Or did she only do it after silence? That wasn't coincidence. That was the ego trying to rebuild the old pattern. Because your silence threatened its structure. It's not always love that brings people back. Sometimes it's just loss of control. And that's the most dangerous kind of return, because if you're not grounded, you'll let her back in just to re-establish the same broken dynamic. And that's what we don't do anymore. You don't break your silence for her ego's comfort. You break it only if she's coming back with value, real, visible, consistent effort. Anything less, and she's not coming back to you. She's coming back to the power you took away. You must understand. Your attention is a resource. Your time, your texts, your presence, they are gold. And just like gold, they lose value when they're handed out freely. The reason she doesn't panic when you send another message is because she knows she can get one any time. There's no scarcity, no mystery, no power, but the moment she senses that door closing, her ego has no tools left, because the one who doesn't seek cannot be manipulated. And that's who you are becoming. A man who doesn't need to prove, chase, or explain. You observe, you hold frame, you protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. And the longer you hold that silence, the more you begin to see clearly. You were never trying to win her. You were trying to win yourself. Number 2, she'll pretend you don't matter. When you go silent, the first thing she does isn't cry, and it's not call her best friend in tears. It's perform, because performance is the defense mechanism of a wounded ego, not because she's unaffected, but because she needs you to believe that she is. She needs the world to believe it, and most of all, she needs to convince herself that losing your attention didn't shake the foundation of how she defines her worth, because when she's used to being chased, used to having men orbiting her like she's the center of a social solar system, the moment one star, one real, masculine, present, emotionally self-contained star disappears, her whole sense of power begins to dim. But she won't show that, no. What she'll do is reach for the mask, the digital armor, the curated content. She'll post that photo where she's laughing too hard at brunch. She'll share a gym selfie captioned, "Working on me." She'll upload a meme about energy and boundaries and how she's better off alone, and it will all be so loud, so visually distracting, so unapologetically staged that most men, the ones who don't understand female psychology, will look at it and say to themselves, "She really doesn't care." And they'll fall back into the loop, chasing, texting, apologizing for pulling away, hoping to rekindle the access they used to have. And in that moment, the power dynamic flips back to where she wants it. Because her ego wasn't just hoping you'd disappear quietly. It was hoping you'd come crawling when it looked like she'd moved on effortlessly. But when you don't chase, when you hold your frame, when you watch her pretend and don't blink, don't budge, don't respond, that's when the cracks begin to show. She can't help it, because pretending not to care takes energy, and ego defense has an expiration date, especially when it's being fueled by a lie. And the lie is that your absence means nothing to her. And here's where it gets deep. The women who scream the loudest about being unbothered are often the ones who are the most bothered, not just by your silence, but by what your silence represents. The loss of influence, the loss of emotional leverage, the realization that your value wasn't tied to your availability, but to your decision to give her access in the first place. And now that access is gone, and she has no control over why. And that loss of control is what hits hardest. Not because she loved you. Many of them don't even love the man. They love the feeling he gives them, the attention, the chase, the power to reject or reward. And when that goes away, they panic, but not outwardly. No, outwardly they double down on the illusion. They post more, they go out more. They act like they're thriving, but if you could peel back the screen, sit in the quiet with them, see the real behind the performance, you'd find someone scrolling through your profile, checking if you've watched her story, rereading old texts, asking mutual friends what you're doing, and all the while, still posting like none of that is happening, because if the outside world sees her panic, her pride is wounded. And for many women today, especially in the hyper-connected, hyper-validated culture we live in, pride has replaced connection. Image has replaced intimacy, and performance has replaced presence. And that's why your silence isn't just confusing, it's a mirror, and it reflects back to her everything she doesn't want to see. That she wasn't as irreplaceable as she thought, that her emotional hold over you wasn't as permanent as she assumed, that maybe, just maybe, you were the prize the entire time and she never realized it. And here's the part most men overlook. When she pretends you don't matter, she's not doing it because she's truly indifferent. She's doing it because she knows you did. And pretending is her way of avoiding the confrontation with that truth, because admitting she misses you means admitting she took you for granted, and her ego can't afford that admission, not publicly, maybe not even privately, so she builds stories in her mind. She tells herself you were too intense, too clingy, too unavailable, too something, anything to justify why she doesn't feel okay now that you're gone. And she'll tell others the same thing, because the ego needs a narrative. And the narrative has to paint her as in control. And that's why you'll hear things like, "He was too into me. I think he wanted something I couldn't give. He was cool, but I just wasn't feeling it." And you'll hear it from people you didn't even know she talked to about you, because her ego doesn't just want to convince itself. It wants to protect its status. And your silence threatens that status more than any insult, more than any argument, more than any dramatic goodbye could, because silence can't be controlled. One who dictated the energy. And that's why pretending is her first move. Not because it's strategic, but because it's instinctual. She learned early that showing emotional neediness costs social capital, that being the first to care is a form of exposure, and so she hides behind selfies and sarcasm and pseudo-philosophy, behind quotes about self-worth and strength, while every moment of your silence is quietly dismantling the fantasy she built about her own irresistibility. Now imagine this. You were talking to a woman regularly. Things seemed deep. She even said she missed you. Maybe you were intimate, maybe not. But there was energy, there was presence, and then it shifted. Maybe she became cold, distant, busy. And then she just stopped trying, and what did you do? If you're like most men, you probably reached out, tried to fix it, tried to restart the spark, and the more you chased, the colder she got, until finally you either got ghosted, blocked, or breadcrumbed into months of confusion. And maybe now she's posting like she's never been happier, and it hurts because you gave your heart and she gave you silence. But what if I told you that same story, inverted, is exactly what she feels when you hold your frame, when you stop giving the attention that used to validate her morning, when your name no longer lights up her phone, when her newest photo doesn't get your reaction, and suddenly she's feeling the same spiral you once felt. Only now, she can't admit it because her pride won't let her, and so she pretends. But the pretending is loud, and the louder it gets, the clearer it becomes. She's not indifferent, she's trying desperately to seem like she is, and this is where your real test begins. Because now you'll see her post that old memory, that cryptic quote, that photo that feels like it's meant for you, and you'll wonder, is she thinking of me? And yes, she probably is. But your job isn't to respond, it's to discern, because what she's showing you is her need to win, not her readiness to connect. This is exactly what you must do when she pretends you don't matter. You double down, not on bitterness, not on ego games, but on building yourself, because the stronger your foundation becomes, the less her performance affects you. And every hour you spend in the gym, every page you read, every habit you create, every dollar you earn, every rep you push, every day you wake up and choose yourself over chasing an illusion, that's another brick in the fortress of your identity, a fortress she can't shake no matter how loud her pretending gets. And eventually, either she breaks character and reaches out, or she fades into irrelevance. And either way, you win, not because you got her back, but because you got yourself back. and the you who was once addicted to approval is now immune to performance, because you've seen behind the curtain and you've chosen silence over submission, clarity over chaos, substance over story, and most of all, power over performance. Number 3, her curiosity will start to bleed out. When a woman begins to feel your silence, not as a temporary pause but as a signal that you've redirected your emotional energy, when the messages stop flowing, when the attention she didn't even realize she relied on suddenly disappears into a vacuum of self-control, her ego begins to whisper, at first softly, then louder, asking questions she doesn't want to face. Questions like, why hasn't he looked at my story today? Or, did he unfollow me? Or, what is he doing that matters more than me? And she won't ask them out loud, because to speak them would be to admit that the power dynamic has shifted, and if she admits that, then the whole carefully maintained illusion of indifference collapses, and so instead, she lets curiosity slowly infect her, not all at once like a dramatic breakup cry, but drip by drip like water eroding a stone, subtle, invisible at first, but unstoppable. And this is the part that most men never see, because they fold too early. They break the silence just as her curiosity begins to take root, not realizing that the most dangerous type of attention you can give a woman is the one she has to chase. The one that doesn't come cheap, that doesn't arrive daily, that doesn't ask how her day was, unless she earns that interest back. And if you can stay silent long enough, not with bitterness, but with purpose, not with games, but with grounded self-respect, you'll begin to see it happen in real time, because the moment her curiosity bleeds out of her ego and into her behavior, she becomes the one scrolling, checking, watching, and she won't like it. She'll resent that she even cares. But that resentment is the seed of emotional exposure, and emotional exposure is where masks fall off. She'll check your profile late at night, not to like anything, never that, not at first, but to see who you've been with, if you've been out, if your energy feels different, and energy is everything, because energy doesn't lie. It's not about the picture you post, it's about whether you posted for approval or for expression, and women can feel that. They can sense when your glow comes from healing and progress instead of baiting and insecurity. And when she sees that you've been active but not reactive, present but not pursuing, living but not performing, she gets uncomfortable, not because she wants you back, at least not yet, but because she no longer knows where she stands in your life. And this is where her internal narrative begins to shift, because she used to be the sun and you were just another planet. But now she's not sure if she's even in your orbit, and that insecurity, that uncertainty, that reversal of roles, it creates anxiety, and anxiety leads to analysis, and analysis leads to obsession, and this obsession doesn't look like love. It looks like overthinking, like stalking your last scene, like wondering why your friends are suddenly liking new girls' photos, like analyzing your new gym selfies for signs that you've changed. And in this state, she becomes a detective of your digital life, searching for clues, signs, evidence that she still matters. Because in silence, what matters isn't what's said, but what's withdrawn. And when attention is withdrawn without warning, the mind tries to fill in the blanks. And when the mind is forced to guess, it spirals. Ask yourself this. How many times have you found yourself looking at someone's profile who stopped giving you attention, even if you didn't like them that much? It's not about love. It's about pattern disruption. When someone breaks a pattern, especially one you felt entitled to, your brain registers it as loss, and humans hate loss. We are wired to seek closure, and in the absence of closure, we obsess, and that's exactly what she begins to do. Not because she's fallen in love with you overnight, but because she's not used to being uncertain, and uncertainty breeds interest. It creates an emotional itch that needs scratching, but every time she looks and doesn't get a message, doesn't see your name in her story views, doesn't see any trace of the man who used to be so available. That itch becomes deeper, more painful, and eventually she starts showing up again, subtly, tentatively, and often in ways that seem accidental. She'll comment on your story with a laughing emoji. She'll like a photo she ignored months ago. She'll share a meme on her page that aligns suspiciously well with something you talked about privately. And this is the moment that defines your growth, because how you react when her curiosity becomes visible reveals whether your silence was strength or just strategy. And if it was strategy, you'll jump, respond too fast, throw away all the leverage, and find yourself back in a one-sided game. But if it was strength, if your silence came from self-worth, from a rebuilt sense of identity, from a man who found value in his own peace, then you won't need to respond, not because you're cold, but because you've outgrown the need for validation from someone who couldn't give it without condition. Curiosity isn't love, and many men make the mistake of confusing the two. Just because she watches every story doesn't mean she's ready to commit. Just because she asks about you through friends doesn't mean she's healed her patterns. Just because she texts, "I miss our conversations," doesn't mean she's prepared to give you the respect she never did. Curiosity is a window, not a door, and unless she opens that window with consistent behavior, with investment, with effort, then you don't climb through, you don't lower your standards, you don't let old energy access a new version of you, because a woman who only got curious when you went silent was never connected to you. She was connected to your availability, and when that was gone, her ego freaked out. And that freak out isn't your responsibility, it's her wake-up call, and the only thing you owe her now is distance. Not cruelty, not resentment, just distance, because your silence was not a punishment, it was a revelation, and her curiosity, as flattering as it might feel, is still her responsibility to process, not your invitation to regress. So what do you do when her curiosity starts to bleed out? You keep building. You use her attention as fuel, not to chase but to evolve. You go harder in the gym. You spend less time on your phone and more time creating, learning, growing. You develop new skills, deepen your purpose, redefine your circle, and if you do this right, one day she'll come across your profile and realize that you didn't just go silent, you went up. And by then, you won't need her curiosity. You'll be living in purpose, because her curiosity is temporary, but your progress is permanent. And in the end, that's what this was always about. Not making her miss you, but making yourself someone you'd never walk away from again. Number 4, focus on yourself. When the silence stretches long enough, when the pretending has run its course, and when the curiosity finally hits its emotional ceiling, there comes a moment where you're no longer asking what she's thinking, what she's feeling, or when she'll come back. And instead, you begin asking different questions, deeper questions, like, who am I when I'm not seeking validation? Who do I become when I stop giving away my energy to people who never earned it? How do I rebuild the version of myself that was once diluted by my addiction to her approval? And that's when the real shift happens, not the temporary boost of ego you get from being stalked online or messaged again, but the internal shift where your attention, the most powerful resource you own, turns inward for the first time in a long time. And when it does, you start to see the cracks in your own foundation, the habits that were formed not from strength, but from desperation. The way you checked your phone 20 times a day, hoping for her name to light it up. The way your day could be ruined by a dry reply. The way your sense of confidence was tied to whether or not she smiled at your message or laughed at your joke. And it's in that confrontation, raw and uncomfortable as it is, that you reclaim yourself, not in a dramatic movie moment transformation, but in quiet, disciplined decisions that seem small, but are everything. Like choosing not to open her story, not because you're angry, but because it serves no purpose. or getting up early to train your body because your self-worth no longer needs her validation to justify your reflection, or deleting old conversations because you no longer need reminders of a connection that never fed you fully. And these choices, seemingly tiny, begin to stack into something massive: self-respect. You begin to realize that she was never the goal. She was the mirror, showing you what you were willing to tolerate when you didn't value yourself. And now that you do, the mirror cracks, and behind it is the man you were always capable of being. The man who trains not for aesthetics, but for strength. Who reads not for escape, but for wisdom. Who writes not for others, but to hold himself accountable. Who walks into a room not hoping to be noticed, but fully grounded in the knowing that he belongs. And this isn't about becoming cold or detached or unfeeling. It's about no longer being available to energy that drains you. It's about building a life so full, so magnetic, so rooted in purpose that you no longer chase women. You draw them in by the gravity of your discipline, your clarity, your focus. And when they arrive, it's not because you needed them, it's because you're now a man who can choose from overflow, not lack, who can give without losing, who can love without abandoning himself. Think of the man who wakes up at 5 a.m. to run when it's dark and no one sees it. That man is doing more than cardio. He's reinforcing a contract with himself, one that says, "I do hard things not for recognition, but because they refine me." And that mentality becomes a lens through which he sees everything else. He eats clean, not because it's trendy, but because his body is a temple, not a trash bin. He journals his thoughts because his mind is not a place for chaos to roam unchecked. He works hard at his craft because excellence is a reflection of identity, not circumstance. And suddenly, he's no longer available for flings, for casual connections that waste his energy, for women who want his presence but not his purpose. And this is the man women feel long before he speaks, because his energy doesn't chase, it commands. And that energy is born in solitude, in silence, in those lonely days when you could have broken and reached out, but instead you reached inward, when you could have scrolled her profile for dopamine, but instead you scrolled your own soul and asked, what does the highest version of me look like, sound like, walk like, think like? You begin to realize that every message you didn't send, every reply you withheld, every temptation you resisted wasn't a loss. It was a deposit into your emotional bank account, and that balance begins to grow into a fortress that protects you from ever going bankrupt over another woman again, because you finally understand the real cost, not just in time or energy, but in identity, in dignity, in lost days and sleepless nights, trying to decipher mixed signals and overthink texts. And you tell yourself, never again, not out of bitterness, but because your peace has become too expensive to trade for temporary connection. And now when she comes back, if she does, you're not angry, you're not cold, you're not smug, you're simply unmoved, not because you don't feel, but because you've built something more powerful than emotion, a life. And in that life, there is space for love, but not for confusion, for partnership, but not for power struggles, for reciprocity, but not for emotional charity. And even if she never comes back, you stop caring. Not in a numb way, but in a free way. Because your healing is no longer about her response. It's about your responsibility, your decision to wake up every day and show up for yourself with the same passion you once reserved for someone who barely showed up for you. And that decision leads to everything else. Better friendships, because you no longer tolerate disrespect. Better finances, because your focus isn't fractured by obsession. Better health, because you're no longer stress eating or skipping workouts to wallow. Better purpose, because your mind is no longer cluttered with fantasy. And as your life expands, so does your vision. And suddenly you realize how small you were living, how much you were shrinking to fit into a connection that couldn't even contain your potential. And you smile, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. And the irony is, now that you've stopped waiting, stopped watching, stopped wondering, now that your attention has become rare, now that your time has become sacred, now that your energy has become precious, now the world starts to notice, now women who once ignored you start paying attention, now opportunities you thought were reserved for other men begin to open, not because the world changed, but because you did, and that change wasn't born in noise, in performance, in pursuit. It was born in silence, in solitude, in the decision to focus on yourself with a ruthlessness that said, I don't chase, I choose. And that choice is what makes all the difference, because in a world of men seeking approval, you became the man who gave it to himself first. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking it from people who were too small to give it. And now you know, silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's where clarity begins and illusion dies. It's where boys keep chasing and men start choosing. You've lived the pain of approval addiction. Now live the power of self-command, not to win her back, but to never lose yourself again. If this spoke to you, comment below, I choose silence. Don't just keep this video to yourself. Spread it. Share this video with a brother who needs to hear what you just felt. Hit subscribe and let this channel be the voice that helps men rebuild. One truth at a time. Every click supports truth. Every share saves someone from repeating the painful cycle.